tips, but I want to have you write down just 2 quick definitions. The first is principal, and I know it's spelled the same as a principal at a school, but it doesn't mean the same as a principal at a school. Principal is the amount you borrow or the amount you have. So principal could be the amount you put into an account, or principal could be the amount you borrow from an account. So that's this whole amount of money. So principal could be you put $100 into the bank. So that's your principal amount. Principal could be that you borrow $100 from a bank. That's your whole amount. Now interest is the amount added or charged. So interest could be bad or good. So interest can be good if you have a savings account and you earn interest on your money. So that could be good. Or interest could be bad if you borrow money and they charge you interest for the money you borrow. So interest could be a bad thing or a good thing depending on the situation you have. Okay, so Brendan left. I'm not marking him here if he's gone, so we'll see if he comes back. So that's the 2 words that go along with everything we're doing today. So principal and interest. So what is a tip? So first we're going to talk about what a tip is. We have Kendra has 3 friends who have birthdays during the summer. Every year she buys them dinner to celebrate. This year the bill came to $125. Kendra says, I like to leave a tip for a wait person for good service, but I never know how much money to leave. Rhonda said 15%, Shirley said 20%. So without using a calculator, and I want you to chat your answers, I want you to tell me how you can mentally figure out 15%. So you can use paper and pencil, I'm fine. Technically that's not mental math, but how could you find 15% of $125? So how can you use mental math to do that? So this is your whole amount. You're trying to find 15% of that amount. How could you do that mental math? I know you can do formulas for that, but mental math, how could you do that? Okay, and yes, Vivi, that's how you would do the formula, but how can you do that in your head? Like, think about what you can do. Think about what I talked about last week where finding certain percents of a number that you could do in your head. What percents are easy to figure out in your head? Okay, 0%, 5%, 10%. Yes, Kay. So think about what Kay just chatted. She said to think about 5% of a number, that's easy. 10% is really easy. So if I find 10% of $125, how much money would that be? 10% of $125. To find 10% of a number, all you have to do is move the decimal point. 1 hop back. Good, 1250. So think about when I said hop the decimal point, run a hop back. To find 10% of this number, 10% of this would be 1250. So all you have to do is hop the decimal point back. So if that's 10%, how can I easily find, well, $1.25 would be 1%, okay? So 1250 would be 10% of 125. If you hop it 2 places back, that's 1%, which we're gonna use that later. So 10% of 125 is 1250. How would I find 5% of 125? Using the 1250. So if 10% is 1250, how can I easily find 5%? If this is 10%, how can I use this to find 5% of 125? Okay, Vivi said half of 1250. Good. So figure out what half of 1250 is. If you have $12.50 and you have to share that with somebody, how much would that be? If you have $12.50, what's half of that? I see $6.25, which would be correct. Now, so if I find 10% of a number, it would be $12.50. 5% of 125 would be $6.25. So how much would 15% be? Now it's just adding. 10% is $12.50, 5% is $6.25. So all I have to do is find the total of $12.50 and $6.25. So what would that total be? $18.75, good. So to find 15% of a number, it takes a little bit more work than 20%. 20% you should know that that's going to be easier to figure. So if I want to leave a 15% tip on $125, I would leave $18.75 because that's a big dinner bill. That's a lot of money. So that's how much you would tip for 15. Now, 20% is easier than 10%. I mean, 15%. It's easier. Think about how would you find a 20% tip or 20% of $125? What would you do first? Divide by 5 is good. If you could do that in your head, Tommy, that'll work. Think without paper and pencil, how can you easily find 20% of 125? Yes, do 10% and then add them together. So we know 10% is $12.50. So if I double $12.50 by multiplying or adding, what would be 20%? $25, good. So 20% would be $25. So that's how you can do it. You should be able to, in mental math, you should be able to find 20% of any number. So if I say $200, what's 20% of $200? Just type it in when you get it. 20% of $200. Anybody? Anybody agree with Kay? She's saying $40. Anybody agree? Good, it is 40, because if 10% of $200 is $20, 20% would be $40. You could do that with any number. So if I say 20% of $100, that would be what? $20, good. Even more difficult numbers. If I say to find 20% of $32, can anybody do that really fast? 20% of $32. $6.40. See how you can do these quick? And this is a good skill, because if you're at a restaurant, either working at a restaurant or eating at a restaurant, 20% is a nice fair tip. So if your bill is, say your bill is $70, you would just take 10% is $7, double that, that's $14. So it's always 20% is the easiest one to find, because you just double 10%. 15% isn't too difficult, but 20% is easy to find. So hopefully that helps you with some shortcuts for 20%. Now, how about 18%? If we wanted to find an 18% tip in our head, this is a little bit more complicated. Now, Kay said something about 1% earlier. I just tipped 20%. It's easier to find out. But if you want to tip exactly 18%, how would I find 18% of $125? Think about the information we know. We know that 10% is $12.50. We know 5% is this. And think about what Kay said about, she spoke about what 1%. What would 1% of $125 be? $1.25. Good. So if 1% is $1.25, How many 1% do I have to add to the 1875? 3, yes. So if I have 125 times 3, mental math again, you have $1.25. You have 3 groups of $1.25. How much money is that? Good, $3.75. So if I add this to my 15%, if you want to tip 18% instead of 20% or instead of 15%, because 18% is usually a common tip, how much money would that be total? Good, $22.50. I see a few people typing the same thing. So that'd be $22.50. So those are some good mental math strategies to use. And I know there's a lot of cheater guides out there. If you've ever looked at a restaurant bill, they usually show you what 15 or 18 or 20% is on there. But this is a good way to do mental math. Whether it's a sale in the store to figure out how much money you're saving or how much money you should tip, either way. So these are good skills to have. Yes, Vivi, there are definitely different ways to get there. But what I always wanted you to think of is what can you do without paper and pencil and without a calculator? So I know I could figure out 20% in my head, and then that's an easy thing to calculate. And plus, sometimes restaurants put the wrong percentages on bills. So I'd rather know how to do it in my own head so I don't pay the wrong amount. So that's how you would do a percent of a number mental math. And you can see the answers are the same down here. So we had 15%, 15% would be $18.75, 20% would be $25, and $22.50 is 18%. Yes, you just use the most efficient way that you want to for that. Now this is a little bit more complicated problem. Now for this one, I'll allow you to use the methods that we learned before. So we have Lorraine's father wants to teach her about saving money. He offered to act as a bank account and keep her money safe. He would pay her 4% simple interest. Simple interest, okay, Devin, bye-bye. Simple interest is different than compound interest. Compound interest is different because it happens over time and it changes over time. Simple interest is very simple. It stays the same whether it's over a year or 3 years, it's always the same amount of interest. So simple interest is an easier concept to know. And that's what you learn this year. Next year, you'll learn more difficult interest. So 4% simple interest if she saves her money. So these are the amounts that she has. She gave her dad $1,000 and he'll pay her 4% interest on it as long as she saves that money. And now we're thinking for a year, they're going to have this in the account. Jill was going to save $800 and then she would get 5.5% interest if she gave her mom $800, and then Mickey gave $950 and they will pay 4.5% interest. Now what I want you to do is I'm going to set up one of these problems. I want you to figure out this one first, and I want you to use the formula that we practiced last week. So we're going to do Lorraine's first. We're going to find each amount of money that they're going to get on top of the money that they gave. So I'm going to show you the formula really fast, and then I want you to figure this out. Remember, it's always the percent is over here, so this would be percent, which is 4%, so that's 4 over 100. And over here, the total amount is $1,000. And the part we're solving for is here. So remember, you're doing your cross products like usual. This is just like last week now. Now there's other ways to do this problem, but this is the way I showed you last week. So you're going to multiply both sides. And now finish this problem up. I started the problem for you, so finish it up with the last step and then tell me what x would equal. And you probably mentally could see this without even needing a calculator for this one because of the zeros involved. So how much would Lorraine get on top of her $1,000 if she gives her dad $1,000 and she gets 4% interest? Good, $40. So remember, this is, and you have you have a few of these problems on your homework for next week where I want you to do equation work. That means balancing equations like I'm doing here. See how I'm showing my work? Because next year they're going to expect you to know how to do this. Oops, get rid of that. Oops. Both of those gone. So x equals 40. So it would be $40. So she would get $40. So you see, that's the example right now. I want you to take a minute and I want you to figure out Jill's. I'm not going to set that up for you, but use this example to set up Jill's. Don't worry that it's 5.5. Just put 5.5 over 100. Use your calculator to do any multiplication that you need help with. That's fine. But I want you to simplify it and solve Jill's amount of money. Tommy, that's free money though. You're saying that's nothing, but it's free money. She's getting money just for having her money sitting there. Something's better than nothing. So figure out Jill's. I'm going to erase this work. I'm going to just take out the parts that are going to change. So when I see a couple of people type in answers for how much Jill, so you should be working on this one on paper and pencil now. I want to know how much money she'll have. Now Jill's amount, just check, will be a whole number amount. It will not be a decimal. If you do the math right, it will be a whole number. So how much will Jill have? I'm going to wait for a few people to respond, and then we'll go through. I'm going to just set this up. I'm not solving it. I'm just setting it up with where everything should be. $800. So I had 3 people say $44. Well, that is correct. So this is the way you would show the work. If this was on your homework. So you do 5.5 times 800, which was 4,400. And again, calculators are fine. Remember, you can use calculators for the multiplication. You just have to show me like this. This is the kind of work I need to see. I just need to see the equation set up, but you can use a calculator to simplify the parts of the equation. As long as you're showing me the setup, I'm happy. So then you divide both sides and you end up with $44, which is correct. Good. So she had 40, she had 44. And then Mickey is the last person. So let's do Mickey's on your paper. So Mickey had $950 and her parents will pay 4.5%. So we're gonna see if Mickey's going to have more than $44 or less than $44, who's gonna be the most. So go ahead and do Mickey's work. I'm gonna erase the parts that are gonna change. So this is what you're doing now. Now Mickey's will be a decimal answer. So when you get a decimal number for Mickey's, you are correct. Don't think that you're wrong. So Mickey's will be money. It will be a dollar amount with nickels, dimes, pennies. I want to get 3 or 4 people to either agree or disagree before I say you guys are good. So I have 1 person that's responded. 2, 3. Daniel, Maddie, are you there? Aiden? Oh, I'd love to see a little bit more responses from you guys. Daniel, Maddie, Aiden. What? You could type it in there too. That's going to help me understand. I can see that the people responding understand. Good. So this would be 4275. Again, all you have to do is fill in the parts of the equation. That's why if you know this equation, it really does help you with percents. It helps you with interest, percents, anything with percents, it will really help you out with, because this should seem easier as you get used to using this formula. So this is how you set it up. Oh, a little messy. We still have the 100 here. And 4.5 times 950. I had that written down. 4.5 times 950. Well, that makes sense. 4,275, which makes sense because when you divide that by 100, you just have to hop the decimal point back 2 places. And that's how you get $42.75. So at this point, who's earning the most interest? Obviously, who? Who's earning the most interest? Jill, yes, $44. But if I change the question, Jill definitely is earning the most interest. Who's going to have the most money at the end? So Jill will have the most interest earned, but who's going to have the most money when it's all said and done? After they cash out, say they do this for a year, who's going to have the most amount of money? Well, it's going to, you know, it's not going to be Jill, but is it Lorraine or Mickey? Who's going to have more money, Lorraine or Mickey? We're saying Mickey. Mickey has 950 plus 4275. Lorraine has 1,000 plus 40. So who's going to have the most money? Definitely Lorraine. Lorraine. So if you add 1,000 plus 40, she'll have $1,040. So again, she started with more money. She'll definitely have more money at the end total, but that lower, because she had a lower interest rate, she's making less interest on her money. So yeah, be careful the way the wording of the question is. So yes, Lorraine will have more total money, but Jill made the most interest off of her money because she had that 5.5% interest, even though she only put $800 away. Any questions on that? I hope that you guys are getting used to this formula, because the formula, it will help you out. If you know percent of a total in parts, whole, if you could keep that in line like that, it will help you out. Yeah, banking's difficult. If your parents or any relatives are in banking, it gets very difficult. This is actually easier than compound interest. Compound interest is much more complicated.